When my son closed the gate that morning, I didn't know it would be the last time I saw him. I stood by the window, holding my teacup, watching him walk down the narrow dirt road that led to the main street. He didn't turn back, not once, and I told myself, he's just in a hurry, but in truth, we hadn't really spoken in weeks. Not properly, just small words. Did you eat? Be careful. I'm fine. We used to talk for hours when he was younger. He would tell me about his dreams, about the stars, about how he wanted to buy me a little house by the river one day. Now, the silence between us had become its own kind of wall. I thought I was being strong, giving him space, letting him live his life. But maybe I was just scared. Scared of saying the wrong thing. Scared he'd think I was a burden. That morning, he looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he avoided mine. I wanted to ask, "Are you okay, Beta?" But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Don't forget your umbrella." He smiled faintly, that polite, distant smile, and said, "I won't." Ma, then he was gone. Later that evening, when the rain started, I found his umbrella leaning against the door. I remember laughing softly. He forgot it again. I thought I'd scold him gently when he came home. But he never did. It's strange, isn't it? How life gives you no warning. How one small goodbye can carry the weight of forever. If I had known, I would have run after him. I would have told him everything I'd kept inside. How proud I was of him. How sorry I was for being too hard. How much I still needed him even though I pretended I didn't. But I didn't know. I just stood there, watching the rain fall against the window, waiting for footsteps that would never return. And that's where my story begins. The day I realized that love, when left unspoken, becomes the heaviest silence in the world. Our house used to be full of laughter once. It wasn't a big place, just a small 2-room home at the edge of the village with peeling paint and a crooked wooden gate that creaked whenever someone opened it. But it was ours. And inside those cracked walls, there lived so much life. My husband, Ramesh, built that house when I was pregnant with our only child, Arav. He wanted a home where our son could grow up seeing trees instead of traffic. Every nail, every brick in that house carried a dream. I remember how the mornings used to begin. The sun would slip through the curtains, touching Arav's face as he slept beside me. I'd sit up quietly, watching him breathe, so small, so peaceful. There's something about watching your child sleep. It makes you feel like the world is safe for one more day. Back then, I thought love was simple. Feed your family, keep the home clean, do your duties, and everything will be fine. I didn't realize love needed more than care. It needed words, warmth, time. Arav was always a quiet boy, thoughtful, observant. When other children played in the streets, he sat under the neem tree with his sketchbook drawing. He drew everything, birds, clouds, faces he imagined. Sometimes he'd draw me sitting by the window and he'd say, "Ma, you look the prettiest when you don't know I'm watching." I'd laugh and say, "Go study, silly boy." But inside, I'd feel something melt. He grew fast, too fast. By the time he reached his teenage years, Ramesh's health had started to decline. Years of hard labor at the mill had weakened him, and he was always coughing, a dry, painful cough that echoed through the nights. Arav would sit by his father's side, rubbing his back gently, whispering stories to distract him from the pain. That boy, he had the softest heart I'd ever seen. When Ramesh passed away, Arav was only 17. He didn't cry at the funeral, not once. He just stood there holding my hand, staring at the fire. Later that night, I found him sitting outside looking at the stars. I placed my hand on his shoulder and said, "He's gone, Beta. We have to be strong now." He turned to me and whispered, "I'll take care of you, Ma. I promise." I remember smiling at him then, proud, but also scared. Because deep down, I knew he'd just grown up in one night. After that, life became quieter. He studied hard, worked part-time, and always made sure there was food on the table. He was only a boy, but he carried himself like a man. Sometimes I wanted to tell him to rest, to let me take care of him like before, but my pride stopped me. I didn't want him to see me weak, so instead of saying, "I'm proud of you," I said, "Don't forget to save money." Instead of saying, "You've done enough," I said, "Work hard. Don't waste time." He never complained. But little by little, the laughter faded from our home. When Arav left for the city to work, I was both proud and broken. He got a good job in an office, something none of us had dreamed of. I packed his bags, folded his shirts, placed a small silver locket inside, a photo of his father and me. He didn't notice it until later. On the day he left, I told him, "Call me when you reach." He said, "Of course, Ma," and he did. At first, every evening, he'd tell me about the traffic, the people, the tiny room he rented, the long hours. I'd sit by the phone, listening, smiling quietly. But as months turned into years, the calls became shorter. Then fewer. At first, he'd apologize, saying, "Sorry, Ma, work is crazy these days." Then it turned into quick messages. "I'll call soon." Then, "Silence," I told myself, "he's busy." That's how life is. But every night, when I looked at his empty bed, something inside me ached. Sometimes I'd cook his favorite dal, just out of habit. I'd end up eating alone, staring at the second plate across the table. The fan would hum softly, the radio would whisper old songs, and I'd imagine him sitting there again, talking about his dreams, laughing at my cooking. I never told anyone how much I missed him. Not even my sister, who lived a few villages away. I just carried on, doing chores, tending the garden, waiting for letters that never came. Years went by like that, quietly, slowly, without warning. Seasons changed, the neem tree grew taller, and my hair turned gray. Once, a neighbor's son came home for the holidays, bringing gifts for his mother, bangles, shawls, sweets. She ran to him crying, hugging him tightly in the courtyard. I smiled from my porch, pretending to water the plants. Inside, my eyes burned. I whispered to myself, "My son must be busy. That's why he hasn't come." But my heart knew better. Soft wind sound, a page turning, perhaps from a letterbox opening. Then, one morning, I received an envelope. The handwriting was familiar, though shakier, more hurried. It was Arav's. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't a long letter, just a few lines. "Ma, I'm sorry I couldn't visit last year. Work's been hard. I'll try to come soon. Don't worry about me. I'm doing fine." No mention of his life, no warmth, just words that felt distant, polite. Still, I held that letter to my chest, tears running down my face. Because even a few words from him felt like rain after a drought. I didn't know it then. But that letter would be the last one I'd ever receive. That was the rhythm of our lives. Love hidden beneath silence, care wrapped in distance. And though I told myself it was enough, my heart never stopped waiting for the sound of his footsteps by the gate. It's strange how silence can grow louder than words. In the beginning, I thought it was just a phase, that Arav would call, or visit, or send a letter again. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and the quiet became part of my life. I still woke up early every morning, made tea for two, poured his share into a cup, and let it cool until the steam disappeared. Then I'd drink it myself. Maybe it was foolish, but it made me feel like he was still there. Sometimes I'd go to the market just to talk to someone. Old vendors, neighbors, the postman, anyone who would stop and listen. I'd tell them stories about my son, how hardworking he was, how proud I was of him. And they would nod politely, smile, and say, "Such a good boy. He must take after you." I'd smile back, pretending everything was fine. But the truth was, I didn't even know what city he lived in anymore. He'd changed jobs twice, moved to new apartments, and I only learned about it through the words of distant relatives. Still, I defended him. "He's busy," I'd say. "He has his own life now." But inside, I felt like a mother without a home. One day I was sweeping the courtyard when the postman arrived again. He handed me a small package, neatly wrapped with Arav's handwriting on it. My heart jumped. Inside was a soft shawl, pale blue, and a short note. "Happy birthday, Ma. Hope you like it. Sorry I can't make it this year. Maybe next time." I smiled and cried at the same time. The shawl smelled faintly of perfume, maybe from the shop, or maybe from someone else. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. I wore that shawl every evening from then on. Not because it was new or beautiful, but because it made me feel close to him. But slowly, I began to sense something changing. Something I couldn't quite name. Neighbors began to talk. They said Arav was doing well in the city, working at a big company. Some said he'd met someone, a woman. I didn't know what to think. He hadn't mentioned anyone in his letters. At first, I was happy. My son had found someone to share his life with. But as weeks passed, I realized he hadn't told me himself. That night, I sat by the window, shawl around my shoulders, staring into the darkness. The crickets sang, the lamp flickered, and I whispered, "Why didn't you tell me, Beta?" I wasn't angry, just forgotten. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. I hadn't heard his voice in almost a year. When I picked up, my hands shook. "Ma," he said, his voice distant, tired. "Arav," I gasped. "How are you, my child?" "It's been so long." He hesitated. "I'm fine, Ma. Just busy." There was a pause, that kind of heavy silence where you can feel 1,000 words wanting to come out, but none finding their way. I asked softly, "You're eating well?" "You look after yourself?" "Yes, Ma." Another pause. Then I said, "Someone told me you're seeing someone. Is it true?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes. Her name is Neha. We've been together for a while." I smiled, even though my heart stung. "Oh, that's wonderful, Beta." "Why didn't you tell me?" He sighed. "I didn't want to worry you. I wasn't sure how you'd feel." "How I'd feel?" I said quietly. "You're my son. Your happiness is mine too." He didn't answer. He just said, "I'll come visit soon." "I promise." But he didn't. Months later, I received another letter, this time not from him. It was from Neha. "Dear Auntie, I hope you're well. Arav talks about you often. I thought it's time I introduce myself. We're planning to get married soon. I wish you could come." I read those words again and again. "We're planning to get married soon." My fingers trembled. My eyes filled with tears. Not because he was getting married, but because he hadn't told me himself. A mother shouldn't have to hear of her son's wedding through a stranger's letter. Still, I wrote back, "Dear Neha, congratulations. I pray you both have a beautiful life together. May God bless you always." I didn't mention the hurt, didn't mention the loneliness. I just folded the letter and mailed it back. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow. Not the kind of crying that makes noise, the kind that aches silently, deep inside your bones. Weeks later, I finally received a call from Arav. He said, "Ma, I wanted to tell you earlier, but things happened so fast." I tried to sound cheerful. "That's all right, Beta. I'm happy for you." "You'll love Neha," he said. "She's kind. She really wants to meet you." I smiled softly. "Then bring her home someday." "I will," he promised. Soon, but soon never came. The seasons kept changing. I grew older, slower. Sometimes I'd sit in the courtyard with my shawl, watching children play on the road, their laughter echoing like memories of my own boy. People asked, "When will your son visit?" I'd smile and say, "He'll come when he can." Inside, I wasn't so sure anymore. Then one evening, out of the blue, I received another phone call. "Ma," he said, "Neha and I moved to a new city. I got promoted." "Oh, that's good news," I said. "You sound happy." "I am," he said softly. Then, after a pause, "Ma, I wanted to ask, would you be okay if we stayed there for a while?" "It's far," I smiled even though he couldn't see me. "You do what's best for you, Beta. Don't worry about me." He hesitated. "I'll come soon, I promise," I whispered. "You always say that." He laughed awkwardly. "I mean it this time." But we both knew, Life had already taken him far away. In the months that followed, I started to notice small things. He didn't call as often. When he did, Neha's voice was in the background, gentle, reminding him of something: dinner, laundry, guests. He'd sound distracted, distant. Once I asked, "When will you come home, Beta?" He said, "Soon, Ma. We're just really busy right now." That "we" stung more than I expected. I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I whispered to the empty room, "He's not mine anymore." The house began to feel emptier. The walls echoed with memories, his laughter, his footsteps, his voice calling out, "Ma, where's my shirt?" Now, there was only silence. Sometimes I'd take out his old sketches from the drawer, faded pencil marks, childish drawings of trees and stars. On the back of one, he'd written, "For Ma, my best friend." I traced the letters with my finger, tears slipping quietly down my cheeks. Best friend. When had I stopped being that? Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I'd pushed him away with my quietness, my pride, my endless "I'm fine" replies. I never told him how lonely I was, how much I needed to hear his voice. I thought mothers weren't supposed to show weakness. But maybe sometimes love means letting your child know you still need them, and so I kept waiting. For a letter, a visit, a call that would bring him back. But all I received were memories. I didn't know then that fate was preparing me for the moment I'd lose him. Not just to distance, but forever. That's how love disappears sometimes. Not in anger, not in words, but in the quiet space between two hearts that forgot how to speak. It was late autumn when everything changed. The mornings had grown cold, the mist heavier. Each day began with a stillness that felt different, too quiet, almost like the world was holding its breath. I remember that morning vividly. I had woken up early as always, made my tea, swept the courtyard, fed the birds. Life was slow, predictable, almost comforting in its loneliness. Then, as I was hanging clothes on the line, the phone rang. At first, I smiled. My heart quickened. Whenever the phone rang, I always hoped it was him. I hurried inside, wiping my hands on my sari, and picked it up. "Hello?" There was silence. Then a woman's voice, trembling, soft. "Auntie." "It's Neha." My heart fluttered. "Oh, Neha Beta. How are you?" "It's been so long." She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, her voice breaking, "Auntie, Arav's been in an accident." Everything inside me went still. The world, the clock, the wind, even my own heartbeat, froze. "What did you say?" I whispered. Her words came slowly, as if she was holding back tears. "He was driving home late from work last night. It was raining heavily, a truck. It came out of nowhere." I gripped the edge of the table. My knees weakened. Is he okay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from her silence. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Auntie. He didn't make it." The cup on the table fell and shattered. I didn't even notice. The sound of her words echoed in my head like thunder in an empty valley. He didn't make it. My son. My only child. Gone. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor, her voice still faintly coming through. Auntie, please say something." But I couldn't. All I could do was stand there, staring at the broken cup, the spilled tea, the small ripples fading away, like the last moments of a life disappearing into silence. The next few days felt like a blur. The neighbors came, whispered their condolences, brought food I couldn't eat. I didn't cry at first. I just sat there, numb, staring at the gate, waiting, as if he might still walk through it and say, "Ma, it's okay." "I'm here," Neha called again. She said they were bringing him home, to me, to rest where he'd been born. I didn't remember how I got to the cremation ground that morning. The air smelled of smoke and rain. I saw his body wrapped in white, his face calm, peaceful, almost like he was sleeping. I wanted to touch his cheek, to brush his hair like I did when he was small. but my hands trembled too much. Neha stood beside me, crying quietly. She was young, so young. Her hands shook as she held the garland. When she saw me, she folded her hands and said, "I'm so sorry, Auntie. He loved you so much." I wanted to believe her. But all I could think was, if he loved me, why did we waste so many years not talking? I placed my hand on his forehead and whispered, "You said you'd come home soon." The wind picked up, rustling the trees. The pyre was lit, and as the flames rose, I felt something inside me break. A quiet, deep breaking that had no sound, no cry, just an emptiness that filled every corner of my heart. I didn't shed tears then. They came later, not in one burst, but slowly, over days and nights, like rain that refuses to stop. After the rituals were done, Neha came to stay with me for a few days. She moved around the house gently, touching things he once touched. His books, his old sketches, the cup he used to drink from. Everything felt like him, yet nothing did. One night, as we sat by the window, she said, "Auntie, he always wanted to bring you to the city. He was saving money for it." I looked at her, startled. "He never told me," she smiled faintly through her tears. "He wanted to surprise you. He said he'd find a small house with a garden, just like this one." I closed my eyes. The pain was unbearable. Not because of what I lost, but because of what I never knew. All those years I thought he was too busy, too distant, too changed. But maybe he was just trying, in his own way, to make me proud. Neha handed me a small envelope. "He wanted you to have this," she said softly. It was a letter, old, creased, stained in one corner. I unfolded it carefully. "Ma, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say it myself. I know I haven't been the best son. I've been caught up in work, in life, in trying to make you proud. But every night I think of home, of you sitting by the window, of Baba's laughter, of the smell of dal on Sundays. I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Sorry for the distance. Sorry for every time I made you wait by the phone. I never meant to leave you alone. I love you, Ma, more than words can ever say. I'll come home soon, I promise." By the time I finished reading, the ink had blurred from my tears. I pressed the letter to my heart and whispered, "You did come home, my son. Just not the way I hoped." For days I wandered through the house like a ghost. Every corner carried his memory, his childhood laughter, his voice calling, "Ma, where's my bag?" The walls held echoes that refused to fade. Sometimes I caught myself setting 2 plates at dinner again. Then I'd realize what I was doing and my hands would freeze. The nights were the hardest. The bed felt too big, the silence too deep. I would whisper into the dark, "Are you still listening, Beta? Can you hear me?" And though no answer came, I liked to imagine he could. One evening I went through his old box, the one where I kept his things since childhood. Inside were his sketches, school report cards, an old toy car, and the locket I'd packed in his bag when he first left home. I opened it. Inside were 2 faded photos, Ramesh and me smiling, younger, full of life. Behind it, written in tiny letters, were the words, "For the 2 people who taught me love." My hands shook. I realized I'd spent so many years waiting to hear those words, not knowing he'd already said them. Quietly, in his own way. After Neha left for the city again, the house grew emptier than ever. But something had changed in me. The grief was still there, yes, sharp and endless. But beneath it was a strange kind of peace. I began to see things differently. Every morning I would sit by the window, the same one I used to watch him leave from. And instead of waiting, I started to talk to him, softly. As if he were there, I'd say, "The marigolds have bloomed, Beta," or, "I made your favorite doll today." It might sound foolish, but it helped. Maybe that's what love becomes when it has nowhere else to go. A quiet conversation with the wind, a memory that answers in silence. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I could almost see him, standing at the gate again, smiling, umbrella in hand. And I'd whisper, "You forgot it again," That image stayed with me, his smile, his eyes, the sound of his laughter. And though the ache never left, I learned to live with it, gently, like holding something fragile and precious at the same time. That was the day I realized the truth that took me a lifetime to understand. Love is not in the grand gestures, or the gifts, or even the words. It's in the waiting. It's in the small acts we overlook. The shawl he sent, the letter he never mailed, the umbrella he forgot. I didn't know it was goodbye that day when he walked down the road. But maybe he did. Maybe that's why he smiled the way he did, soft, kind, a little sad, and maybe, in his heart, he was already saying the words I never heard, "I love you, Ma." That was the day everything ended. But it was also the day something began. A new understanding, a quiet forgiveness, a peace I didn't know I could still feel. It has been 3 years now. 3 monsoons have come and gone since that day. The rain still falls, the fields still bloom, and life, somehow, continues. In the beginning, I used to mark the days, the weeks, the months. Now I no longer count. Time has softened its edges. Grief, once sharp as glass, has become smooth. Not gone, but changed. Every morning, I wake with the sun. I light the lamp by his photo, place a marigold beside it, and whisper, "Good morning, Beta." Then I make my tea, sit by the window, and watch the world unfold. The children walking to school, the milkman cycling past, the sound of the temple bell echoing across the fields. Life has a rhythm again, slower, gentler but alive, soft flute and distant birds in background. Sometimes the neighbors come to visit. They bring stories, laughter, small bits of gossip. At first I used to listen quietly, lost in my own silence. But lately, I find myself joining in, even laughing. It startled me the first time I laughed again. It felt strange, almost guilty, like joy was a luxury I no longer deserved. But then I remembered something Arav once told me when he was little. I was scolding him for breaking a vase, and he had said, "Ma, it's okay. You can always fix it with glue. You just have to be patient." That memory made me smile. Because in a way, he was right. He broke my heart when he left, but slowly, gently, I've been gluing the pieces back together. One evening, I decided to clean his old room. For years, I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Everything was just as he left it. His books, his guitar, even the watch on his bedside table. But that evening, the sunset filled the room with a golden light, and something inside me whispered, "It's time." I opened the windows, letting the breeze in. Dust danced in the sunlight like tiny stars. I took each item in my hand, his shirt, his sketches, his old shoes. And instead of crying, I smiled. Each thing told a story. Each memory had weight, but also warmth. As I folded his clothes, I came across a small wooden box I'd never opened before. Inside were small trinkets, a movie ticket, a seashell, a tiny note. The note read, "Ma will like this one." It was written in his messy handwriting. I laughed through tears. "You were right, Beta. I do." Soft wind sound, then transition into birds and temple bell. A few months later, Neha came to visit. She had remarried, a kind man, she said. When she told me, she hesitated, afraid I might disapprove. But I took her hands and said, "Life must go on, Beta. He would want you to be happy." She cried then, and so did I. Not from sorrow, but from release. Before she left, she placed something on my table, a small potted plant. "He used to love these," she said. Said they reminded him of home. I put it by the window. Every morning I water it. It's grown taller than I expected. Green, strong, reaching for the light. Sometimes I talk to it. I say, "You're growing well, just like he wanted." It may sound silly, but I believe he hears me. Through the wind, through the rustling leaves, through the soft hum of the world around me. One afternoon, while sweeping the veranda, I heard a familiar sound, a child's laughter. A little boy from the neighborhood had wandered in, chasing his toy car. He looked up at me, wide-eyed, and said, "Auntie, can I play here?" I nodded, smiling. Of course, Beta. He began to come every day after school. He'd play with his toys, ask for biscuits, and tell me stories about his friends. His name was Kabir. He reminded me so much of our Rav, the same restless energy, the same sparkle in his eyes. One day, as he was leaving, he stopped at the gate and said, "Auntie, can I call you Daddy?" My throat tightened. I smiled and said, "Only if you promise to bring me flowers sometimes." He grinned. "Deal." From then on, he called me Daddy, and slowly the house filled with laughter again. Not the same laughter, but a new kind. Softer, lighter, healing. The first monsoon after Arav's passing, I couldn't bear the sound of rain. It reminded me of that night, of loss, of finality. But this year, when the first drops fell, I stood outside. The earth smelled alive again, that scent of wet soil, like memory reborn. The rain touched my face, and I didn't hide from it. For the first time, I lifted my hands and let it fall freely, like blessings from somewhere beyond. And in that moment, I felt it. A warmth, a whisper, carried by the wind, Ma. It wasn't a sound I heard, but a feeling, deep and certain. I smiled through tears. Yes, Beta. I'm here. The rain poured harder. But instead of sadness, I felt peace. Because I knew he wasn't gone. Not really. He was here, in the rain, in the wind, in every small joy I dared to feel again. Now, when people ask if I live alone, I smile and say, "No, my son is with me." Just not the way you think. I see him everywhere, in the sunlight that spills across the floor, in the laughter of children outside, in the quiet comfort of a new day. I no longer wait for the phone to ring. I no longer count the years, because love, true love, doesn't leave when the person does. It stays, it grows, it transforms into something eternal. Sometimes late at night, I sit by the window, the same window I used to wait by all those years ago. The moonlight touches his photo, and the shadows dance softly across the room. I whisper, "Do you remember that day, Beta? The day you forgot your umbrella?" I close my eyes and imagine his voice, warm, playful. "Sorry, Ma. I'll come back for it." And this time, I know he already has, not in body, but in every breath of wind that passes through this home.